The Commerce Department will soon mail millions of census forms to all persons across the United States. Some will only be asked how many people reside in this household. Some will be asked dozens of questions about intimate private behavior that occurs within the household. The government will demand of the head of every household that whichever form is received be answered. This will be a test of Americans who believe in personal privacy, the constitutionally guaranteed right to be left alone, to engage in civil disobedience and not answer these personal private questions. The maximum fine for refusing to answer a census question is $100 per question, up to an aggregate fine, a total maximum fine of $5,000, and no jail time may be imposed. The Supreme Court has never ruled on the constitutionality of census questions beyond the counting of heads, but numerous lower federal courts have found it constitutional. However, the Constitution only authorizes the government to count heads. Any questions beyond that is unconstitutional and are quite simply none of the government's business. Joining me now is Walter Williams, professor of economics at George Mason University. Professor Williams, I love when you're on this show. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Good afternoon, Judge.
So where does the government get the authority to ask me how many flush toilets I have, or how much running water I use, or how many sinks or bathrooms are in my house?
Well, it has no such constitutional authority. And a lot of Americans don't understand why the founders put Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution to require that there be a counting of the or a census every 10 years. And the purpose of the census is to apportion the House of Representatives. And so you don't need to know how many toilets I have in order to apportion the House of Representatives.
All right, the House of Representatives, the membership in the House of Representatives per state is determined by the population of the state. And after the census is conducted and we get a fairly accurate reading of the population of each state, they then take those states and apportion members of the House. And some states like California may get more, and some states like New York may get fewer. But the government, as is typical of government, uses this opportunity when it knocks on the door to ask more than who's living here. Can a person legitimately say, you know what? The Constitution says I only have to tell you how many are living here, not who, not their religion, not their gender, and not the number of times they go to the bathroom.
That's right. And so I think that Americans ought to test the Constitution. Yes, I believe that there are laws that as you quoted in the beginning, or that you cited in the beginning, whereby people can get fines for not answering questions. But I think that the government will not fine every single American who refuses to answer the questions.
No, and I think you're right.
I think we ought to test them.
I think you're right. And I think when they say it's the law, and you wrote this, I'm stealing a line from you, Professor Williams.
That's right.
We should simply say it may be the law, but it's not in the Constitution.
That's right.
And the last time I looked, the Congress can't change the Constitution.
And matter of fact, one of the persons that was heavily involved in the Constitution was Thomas Jefferson, and he said, and I quote, "Whensoever the general government, namely Washington, assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force."
And he was quoting St. Thomas Aquinas, who, of course, argued that an unjust law is no law at all, and there is a duty and an obligation to disobey it. And an unjust law would be one that the lawgiver doesn't have the authority to write.
That's right. And matter of fact, maybe some Americans ought to do like I did in 1960 when I was landing in Korea.
That's a very interesting story. What happened to you when you landed in Korea as part of the U.S. military?
Well, when you land, this is like we're coming off the LSTs or landing craft, and you had to give these vital information, your religion, your name, next of kin, and then they had a box where you check race. And so I checked off Caucasian.
And what happened to you, an African American, when you checked Caucasian?
Well, the warrant officer who was checking our forms, he told me you made a mistake, and I said no, I didn't. He said you should check Negro, and so I said, look, the Census Department says that I can determine who I am. I know who I am, and I'm Caucasian. And so he asked me, well, why would you put down Caucasian instead of Negro? I say, look, if I put down Negro, I'll get the worst job over here.
So you were Professor Walter Williams of George Mason University, accurately understanding the institutional discrimination against African Americans by the federal government, by the military itself. Did this warrant officer sort of nod in approval? I know what you're talking about.
No, he did not. He just ignored me. He just told me to go on my way to the next station, and I'm very sure that he changed it after I left.
All right. What should Americans do? I mean, if I get any number of emails in one category, more emails in one category, it's this one, because the census forms are about to be mailed out next month. What should Americans do? Should they basically say, here's a line and thou shalt not pass? Mm-hmm. There are 4 people in my house. There are 3 people in my house. Beyond that, I'm not going to answer. And take their luck that they won't be prosecuted, or go to the bank and get ready to pay $100 per question?
Well, you know, unless I'm willing to pay for them, I can't tell them what to do. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to just ask for some kind of Miranda warning.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. When the government asks you a question that you don't want to answer, you have, quote, the right to remain silent.
That's right. That's it. I'm going to put in there, I exercise my right to remain silent, as the Supreme Court said, ruled some number of years ago in Miranda.
Something tells me that the census takers will not know what to do if the people say, "Give me my Miranda warning." Look, as a practical matter, when the public expresses outrage by a passive, nonviolent, civil disobedience, for which there was a great tradition in American history, the government usually gets the message.
Oh, that's right. And if it's enough of they figure, well, we can't arrest, we cannot fine 5 million or 10 million people.
I'm going to do the same thing you're going to do. I'm going to tell them how many people live in my house if they knock on the door and if I get one of these long forms. And then I'm going to say, give me my Miranda warnings because I have a right to remain silent. Professor Williams told me so.
That's right, Judge.
Oh, always a pleasure having you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
To be on with you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. You can catch today's show on foxnews.com/freedomwatch and on Sirius 145 XM 168 or online at foxnewstalk.com at 6 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. From New York, defending freedom. Until the next time, stay free, America.